yeah, it could be. Is that better? Can you guys hear me now?
Is that better? Can you guys hear me now?
There you go. Somebody switched off my mic. As it happens. Okay, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. I'm gonna just do a little bit of time just to let everybody kind of come in. Thanks for playing today. The idea here is really to kind of just share my photo-inspired process. I thought it would be fun for International Scrapbooking Day, I suppose we would call it. Usually on this day I have kind of a special class with Adrienne and Linda, but that has not worked out this year because of differing schedules. I do have Adrienne making a guest appearance on Monday, and so she's going to look at she's going to deconstruct a layout and talk about one of her pages then. So if you're interested in that, then that's great. And I want to give a shout out to British Designs, who's actually here. Thank you for coming. I actually saw her do this, and she uses my templates, and she's over at the Lily Pad, I believe. And she works with Krista Salen, and they do the Mouse Project. And so they're very big into the whole Disney thing. And so they use my templates sometimes, or at least Britt does. She uses my templates to scrap her Disney photos, and she does this a lot, and she was a real sweetheart. She kind of responded to my emails yesterday about it took a lot to try and get this up and running, and like me, she thought it would be a lot easier than it was. So it's a bit of a challenge to learn something new. I know my way around Photoshop, but not so much the rest of the technology. So I'm grateful for my husband, and thanks for coming, Britt. It's really awesome to have you here, and go check her channel out. She has lots of really fun things going on, and she's a lot more professional than me. She has like really fancy setup and everything, and I hopefully after a little while of maybe doing this, my idea behind this is not to replace the AA Connects, but to instead just provide additional free content. I occasionally do videos over at YouTube, but I don't find that that's very personal. And so it would be really, really nice to have this where I can interact with you and then upload the video to this channel for people to watch if they can't make the live event. So it's just something extra that I thought would be super fun. We'll see how it goes today, see if you guys like it. You guys can give me feedback. We'll kind of go from there. So without further ado, I'm not going to kind of talk too much. If you have questions, please place them in the chat box. That's why I keep looking over, just so that I can view, and it might be in the future that I have something set up laptop-wise actually on my desk, so you're not seeing the side of my head. But for today, I think that this works. It sounds like Anne was able to get her sound issues sorted out. And yes, if you do have multiple tabs open, you will get problems with the sound. But it sounds like everything is good to go. Britt says, Twitch is so fun. I'm glad you got it figured out. I love your templates. I'm at britishdesigns.com. Yeah, so go check her out. I'm not sure if there are any Disney fans here. I personally would rather poke my eyes out than go to Disney. I'm not much of a people person. Not as in people person, but I don't like huge crowds. So I'm glad that my Disney days are over. But I did attend one of her sessions the other day, and she was showing a really cool Star Wars kit. So I know for grandchildren and that kind of thing, it might be something that you guys really enjoy. Definitely a different style to mine. But super, super cool regardless. Really, really good. Okay. Farm Girl says, what did everyone do to get sound? Still no sound here. It's probably something to do with your system. If everybody else can hear, you can try and, well, first of all, make sure that your volume is on. That was the problem in my case. I hadn't got my microphone on, and it's probably because my husband switched it off while we were just testing earlier. So you could do that. You can close out your browser, open it back up, make sure everything's plugged in. You might want to unplug it and replug it in. A couple of little hacks. You might want to restart your system. So yeah, Lacey is asking, can we watch this later? I am hoping so. I am recording this and my idea is to then upload it later. I haven't quite figured it all out yet, but I have it recording in MP format, and I'm going to hopefully bring it into the program that I usually use to edit my programs, and then upload it and have it available to you. If I can't for some reason figure out how to upload it here, then I'll probably make it available by a Dropbox link. We did test the recording capacity and it seems to work, but like I said, this is all really new for us, so there's going to be a few bumps in the road, and I really appreciate your patience while we get that sorted out. Anyway, if there are no more questions, housekeeping sort of questions, then I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to be using some of the products that are new in the store. You can see these are the files that I've had open recently. So I have a bunch of new products out at the moment. I have the Jubilate collection, which is this really fun sort of brightly colored, happy, celebrate sort of art play palette, which I want to try and use today and incorporate with the new FotoInspired templates. So I actually moved my FotoInspired templates into that folder just so that I would have easy access. You obviously are going to organize your files differently. I don't use any sort of file manager. I just use the windows in my system. It seems to work best for me. One of the things I like to do is that you will get the FotoInspired templates in 3 different folders. And so what I like to do is I will just grab the previews by holding down that Control or Command key on my keyboard, and then basically copying these previews and just placing them outside the folders. You could also move the entire collection into one folder. The reason I keep them separately is because for reasons uploading to the store, and I like to keep those download speeds pretty fast for you. So that's the reason why I deliver the products in multiple folders. There are some people who have slower internet. So this way, basically, it gives me a better view of the templates that I have available, so that when I go to my folders or my photos, I'm going to go ahead and access my 2021 photos folder. And you can see I organized my photos by month. And then April, I just did some work yesterday. So all of my photos from April get dumped into this folder. I'm just going to go to view so that you can see it. So all of these photos, to be honest with you, I had a very poor month in taking photos for April. I had a series of migraines at the beginning of the month, and then it's crazy busy. Ella's getting ready to graduate, and we have a ton, sort of just, life just seems to be really full at the moment. Luke is a full-time job, trying to keep him on track with school, and, you know, all of the fun COVID life things that we're having to deal with at the moment. So I dump all my photos in there, and then I create subfolders which relate to the weeks. Now, according to my calendar, I like to run my weeks from Monday through Sunday. That's personally my choice for a week. So I have week 13, I have to go back to April. So week 13 is the 29th through the 4th. So it starts on the 29th and it runs through the 4th. And so all of my photos that I took during that week are in this folder here. And then I do the same thing for the rest of the week. So we've got weeks 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And I've got duplicate copies because I'm not sure which photos I'm going to want to use. So I might want to use this one that I posted to Instagram, which has the kind of the fun caption on it. Or I might want to choose this one, or this one, which is the same as this, but without the caption, slightly larger size. But all in all, I've pretty much got 1, 2, 3, only 4 photos. So my plan today is to take weeks 13 and 14, again, not too many photos, and combine them together into one layout. And it could be that I might end up actually combining 3 weeks because it was such a slow month for photos. So what I do is I look at these images, and I'm actually just going to take all of these images and dump them into one file. I'm not bothered if they get mixed up just a little bit in one spread. So these are this is the amount of photos that I'm going to be working with. And I just want to take a look here. See, week 15, I hardly have any either. So I'm going to copy these over and essentially create a layout with the first 3 weeks of April. So basically I'm kind of doing a month in review sort of scenario. And this is a good number of photos to have. So we've got a sunset photo, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll pick one of these, which is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, between 13 and 15, maybe between 11 and 15. That's kind of a good number of photos. When I'm looking at my images too, I'm always looking at whether they are portrait or whether they are landscape. And I tend to favor the portrait action. I think it's because I'm using my phone. I never think to kind of turn my phone around and do that landscape action. So they're usually portrait. So in this case, all of my photos are portrait. Although something like this, I could crop and make it into a landscape if I needed to. So bearing this in mind, I'm now going to go back to my template pack and I want to pick a set of templates that have an orientation that matches the orientation of my images. And I want to make sure that I have a set or a pair of templates that are going to support those, I think I said 12 photos, which I think most of these will. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then plenty on the other side. So it works out really well using that sort of number range because it means that you have lots of spare masks in order to fill with the fun papers. So this is kind of where I have not done any planning for this. I'm literally just talking my way through it as I am talking to you. So I'm thinking that this one might be a good one. These are squares as opposed to portraits. And I can make these more portrait by removing this label here. One of the fun features that I did actually add to this collection that I've never done before is that I added in the urban threads for you. So let me know what you think about that. I'm just kind of going through and looking. I think I like this one here. It does have a landscape in there, a couple of landscapes in there. But we could also edit this as well to make it work. So yeah, I'm going to make a decision. I'm going with 11 and 12 based on that. I'm going to, again, hold down that control or that command key, and then I'm going to select both of those templates and I'm going to drag them directly from their location into my workspace. You can also go to File, Open, and then that's going to take you into your workspace, and then you can navigate to wherever your files are located. And then we're going to set up our layout. So I'm going to go to File, New, and I like to work at 12 by 12 format. I always recommend, even if you intend printing at a smaller format, that you start with 12 by 12 because you can always size down. It's really hard to size up without recreating what you've already done. So it's always good to go large and then size down if you need to. So I have a preset in here, 24 by 12 inches, because that's basically double the width. So I've got my double page spread and then the height of 12 inches and a resolution of 300 dpi ensures that we have a really great print quality. So I'm going to click that and then click create, and that creates our canvas on which we're going to build our layout design. And then I'm going to select the move tool from the tools panel, click within the ruler guides here. Now, if you can't see those ruler guides, then you go to view. Sorry, my camera is kind of hiding my my bar at the top here. And you want to make sure that you have this rulers option checked. Notice when I click on that, that option disappears. So I'm going to go ahead and re-click that, and then we get these rulers back. And this just shows me in inches how wide my canvas is and how tall it is. So I'm going to click, and then I'm going to drag across to that 12-point mark, and that's going to signify and show us where the center of our design is. So we have the left-hand side of the page here, and we have the right-hand side here. And then I'm going to take those templates with my layers panel open. You can go to Window and just ensure that layers option is checked. If I go back up there now, you can see we have a check mark next to it showing that it's open. And then I'm going to select the very top layer and the very bottom layer. Now I like to include the background layer because this ensures that I get the edges flush and I get the templates actually centered within the side of my design. So with that shift button held down on my keyboard, I'm going to click on that last layer to select all of those layers in the layers panel. And then with the move tool selected and the auto select option unchecked, I'm going to just drag all those layers. Now you can see this dotted line around the back here. This is signifying that background layer. So I can use those arrow keys on my keyboard just to nudge that in position so that I know that it is centralized. And then I can select that background layer. You can turn off the visibility. I just go ahead and delete that layer once I'm done with it. And then ensure that you have your top layer of your layers panel selected. This is going to ensure that when we bring the layers of the second template into our project, that they are going to be deposited on top of those other layers. So the other thing that you can also do as well, if you wanted to, is you could select those layers and go to layer group layers. I personally don't do that, but that is an option there for you if you want to be a little bit more organized about how you put these templates together. So I've done the same thing. I've selected all the layers in the layers panel of our second template. And then again, I'm going to use that move tool, hold down that left mouse button, click, drag and release. And then again, repeat that same action with those arrow keys to move that template into position. And then I actually like to keep this white layer in this case. Sometimes I will go to edit fill and I will do like a bright color, like red. And that way I can kind of see where that position is. So I can see that all of my template layers on the bottom are below the red layer and above. You want to make sure the visibility of that layer is turned off though, of course. That's just kind of one of those little things. I know there are better ways to do it, but it's just something that works really, really well for me. So I am going to go ahead and turn this off, and I'm going to close out these files because we don't need them anymore. We have our canvas all ready and waiting for us. So a couple of neat features about these templates are that you can modify them. So some of the ways that you can modify these templates, I'm going to select the move tool and I'm going to check that auto select box. This allows me then to click on any layer in my layout design and it's going to automatically select that layer in the layers panel. So you have these really fun frame labels which allows you to customize. I like the frame labels to add text to add word labels to. Sometimes you can clip brushes and overlays to them. But they're also a great way for changing the orientation of an image as well. If I go ahead and select this one, you can see if I turn that layer off, then those become, they're a little larger than or more elongated than a square, but then they become really sort of long rectangles. So that's a fun little feature that you have. The other features that I have is you can actually make these triple frames in this particular set into single, so you can customize them. So if you go ahead and turn off these two dividers here, and then you turn off the individual layers, then you can see you have a single template layer beneath. So just a couple of ways that you can sort of modify. It also gives you the opportunity to move these around. If I wanted to make this into a two frame. So you want to select that optional mask layer, because that way when you select this divider, it's going to go in the center. The other option is to select that frame divider, select the optional mask, hold down that Control or Command key, and then use this Align Center button at the top of your window. So you can do that to make sure it's exactly in the center. And then you can turn off this layer here, and then I'm going to remove that center mask layer, and then I'm just going to hold down that Shift button and drag this mask across, and then drag this mask across, and now we have converted that frame to accommodate 2 photos. So a couple of things. Oh, and someone's just told me, did I mean to put them on both sides? So no, I did not, but I'm so busy talking, then I didn't even notice. I would have done eventually. So let's go ahead and we'll just re-grab that template layer. That's the trick. When you're talking and you haven't practiced, then you sometimes don't see this sort of stuff. So there we go. I've now added the correct template. The other features, of course, are these urban threads, which are new with this particular template. I thought that I would add those in for you. And then that's pretty much it. You can, of course, move the frames if you wanted to. So if I want to completely get rid of this 3-frame label situation, I can select all of the 3-frame layers, go ahead and go layer group layers, and I can turn those off. And so now you can just use the masks beneath. So this gives you a lot of options to modify these templates to make them work for your photos. So any questions so far? I haven't kind of stopped to ask if there are any questions. But if any pop up, then just let me know. In the meantime, I'm going to continue on and I'm going to go back to my photos. And the next step for me is to just select all of these photos by holding down that Control or Command key and then dragging those images into my workspace. And I like to open them all. And then I start thinking about where I want to place these images. And usually they're placed in sort of in importance. So I want the most important and the best photos to be in the larger photo spots. And I want the sort of more blurry, less obvious ones, like this one, for example. So this little dog, he's so funny. He moves his bed around the house and I managed to get him doing it. But of course the photo isn't really of super quality. So I want this photo obviously in the mix, but I maybe don't want to have it in a really large area. So we want to pick sort of a small little area for that. So I kind of am thinking either this frame or this frame because those are kind of small frames, but they're still quite centralized. So maybe we will try it in this frame, and it looks like it's a really small photo anyway. So that actually works really well. So I'm going to go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. And then as I'm adding them, I'm going to close them out. So I've got this one, and I don't like this one as much as this one, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that one. I don't need both of them. Ella enjoying the garden. This is where it kind of takes a bit of time. Again, this one here, this one was really to just show that Ella is slightly taller than her dad, much to his disgust. And so I'm thinking that I might want to put that one not super big, again, because it's not really a high quality photo, but I do want to have this sort of area here showing that Ella is actually taller than her dad. So I'm going to stick her into here. And again, I'm not worried about the fact here that I'm mixing up weeks, because I'm going to have 3 weeks in this one template, and I'm just going to add 3 numbers. Now this is a case where we can play around with removing that label. It's going to work out really perfectly if we add that label into the mix. So I'm going to select the label and I'm going to turn off that layer. And we don't want to make this much larger. So I'm actually wondering if this is the right orientation, because I don't necessarily need this up here. So this might be a good opportunity to place this photo in one of these landscape style masks. So I'm just going to turn off the visibility of that now, just in case I decide I want to come back to it. And then I'm going to select this one up here and drag this over and go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. And this is much better because then, now the only issue I'm having with this, I don't want to show this at the top here, the part of the, although it could actually work quite well because it does show the sort of straight line across the top of their heads, but ideally I kind of want that cropped off. But you can see because of the state of the mask, then it is sort of hindering our view of the of the area of the photo that I want to actually see. So I'm going to take that mask and I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to flip that vertically. And what that does is it puts all of that design down on the bottom portion, and it gives us a cleaner part at the top here. And I actually don't mind that. It is hindering their faces a little bit. So the other option here would be to try one of the other masks. So it's not a sort of a one size fits all. You can try out different options to see which one works best. I mean, I can't really see their faces anyway, so it doesn't matter. But that one might be better just because we've got a little more of their facial features in there. We can also try this one if we want to. Go ahead and bring this one in. Layer, create clipping mask. And that one's kind of nice because it does have that sharp edge at the top here. So I think that's the one I'm going to go with. And we'll go ahead and just delete the other ones and then close that out and move on. And then we can start looking at what else we have here. So I love this one of Luke eating his 6 hot dogs and his 3 hot dog buns. So I'm going to put that in a fairly prominent area. Put it in this frame here. Create clipping mask. And then so we've added a bright color here. So as I'm placing these images, I'm not only looking at the best place for them in terms of the masks and the frames, but I'm also looking at colors. So you can see we've got some bright reds and purples now appearing on this side of the page. So I want to try and balance that on the opposing side of the page. So that means I'm looking for those similar colors to place on the other side. And we've got some purples here in Ella's towel, or at least it looks like it's purple. So I'm going to select this mask. It actually gets easier as you start adding more photos. You've got more information to work with. And so therefore, you're more easily able to place those images. So I'm just working on that. And then we've got this one here, Ella working on an art project. And it might actually be that this is a better option to go over here because it's got the red, and we can maybe place Ella further over here somewhere. So I'm just going to turn off that photo layer, duplicate that layer and drag it down to one of those. So we'll just kind of leave it underneath the frames at the moment and turn it back on. Move the photo across. So this could be a good place for this one here, this photo. So maybe add her there instead. It's kind of more closely cropped and we can see her much better in that case. And then add Ella down here. Incidentally, you can turn the auto select button on and off. Is it using the control or command key? So notice when I press the control or command key, that turns off, on or off. I personally just find it quite therapeutic kind of moving my hand around the screen, and so I tend to just do that manually, but you do have that option if you want it. The bonus of having that auto select obviously is that we can locate these layers fairly quickly. So I'm going to put her in there, and that fits really well there. So I'm going to go to layer, whoops. And because we dragged it actually underneath this layer, then it automatically became part of that clipping set. So I didn't actually have to go to layer, create clipping mask. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that photo now because I'm pretty happy with that location. Okay, so now we've got Eric doing the garden. And so a lot of blue and red here. So again, I'm looking at, we've got blue over here, we've got blue here, so I'm thinking either here or here. And in terms of the orientation of this photo, I think it's going to fit better in a portrait style because I want to show the sky and I want to show all of this that he's got going on down here. If I put it in the square, I'm going to lose a bunch of that. So I'm going to place this one down here and go to layer, create clipping mask, and then just maybe resize this so we can get all of that in the shot, and close this down. And then we've got a really nice portrait of Ella, so maybe put that one in this little area here like that. And you can play around with the cropping of it too. You could place it slightly off center, in the middle. You can sort of fill the frame You can move it out so it's not so filled. I kind of like it so that we get rid of all of that blue in the background there. And I like the contrast of the angles in the door, so I'm going to keep it like that. And this is Luke Mann at the doctor's. So where are we thinking we will go here? So here I kind of wanted to, I mean, he's just funny because I take him to pediatrics now and he's 6'2". So that's kind of interesting to me. But this is also part of the sign of the times here where, you know, we're wearing masks and you can't sit on certain chairs because of social distancing. So it might be a good idea in this particular case to keep this chair in the mix. Otherwise, I would be inclined to maybe place that photo in one of these skinny portrait style masks, but I kind of want to keep that in there. So I'm thinking maybe we'll try this square mask here and see how that goes. It looks like it might work quite well. So I don't mind that his legs are sort of hidden behind Ella and we can still see the chair in there, and we've cropped out this at the top here. So that works pretty well for me. We can play around just a little bit with the size. That way I can see a little bit of his shoe if I want to. Go ahead and close that out. And then we've got this one here. So this is where I might want to think about moving some things around again. It could be maybe I kind of want, we've got a landscape down here, so I don't want to really put another landscape down here because then we are dealing with heaviness of the same subject. I like to have kind of angles or diagonals happening with my subject matter. So this is where I'm going to maybe change this one here. And I think what I'd like to do is put that actually in this area at the top here. So I'm gonna go ahead and see where that is. Drag this, I'm actually gonna leave this photo there, just in case I change my mind. Duplicate that image and then bring that up to the top. Turn on the visibility again, and then maybe, and I can afford to make this image of Ella smaller because she's kind of pulling a funny face because the sun is bright and I know she's not going to appreciate me using this image. So if I make that a little bit smaller, then I think that that's going to work pretty well. And then that gives me the opportunity to maybe place this landscape image here. And again, because we already have a photo clipped to that, it's joined the clipping set and I don't actually have to do any work in terms of clipping that image. So I can move this around. I can include the street light if I want to. There's quite a lot of distressing going on here. So that's the way it's going to have to go if that's the, you know, the way I'm going with this. My other option is to move a few things around here. So maybe I move this up here. I bring this down here. This is a different photo, but similar sort of scenario. And then I bring that original photo that we had here. It's going to unclip, but that's okay. And drag it up. Or drag it down, I should say, on top of here. So let's go ahead and just move these photos around. So now I've got this in here. And this works fine. I can still see the sky. I can still see a lot of the gardening stuff that's going on. It actually brings Eric a bit more into focus. And then if I bring this one down here, and we turn that off, then we have that option there. So there's another kind of scenario of the way it works. And I think I like that better. Let's bring this one in. And this shows a lot more. I kind of like that street light coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out. And then we've got these guys doing push-ups. So maybe we'll put these guys down here in this space. This works quite well. Like that. And we don't need this one anymore. Oh, we've got some food here. So maybe I want to put this one down here. So I'm noticing I've got green here and green here. There's a little bit of green down here. But if I add some more green down the bottom here, it's going to balance the green at the top with the green at the bottom. So I can add this in. And I am going to lose a bit of the perspective of that, but that's fine. I think that that works quite well there. And then we've got these seed packets, which are going to go quite well. So now I'm looking at what spaces I have left, or I still have available. So I'm looking at masks that are together. So I've got these 3 masks that are together right now. So I want to break those up. So I definitely want to place something here. So I have the option to put these seed packets here, or I have the option to put these there. So which do I want? To be honest with you, I don't think it really matters. I think I'm going to put the seed packets over on this small one here. So I'm going to drag this up to the top above that mask and go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask, and then just sort of get those to fit. I don't think I need to show them all, but that works. And then close that out and then add this last one in here. And add that into the mix. Again, we don't need to necessarily have all of these in the shot. So I can decide whether I want it like that or if I want it like that. And to be honest with you, I don't like having all these food things all together here. So this is where I'm going to change things around. And I'm going to try this down here, again, to spread out that green. Add some green down to the bottom here. And I think I want it, I actually like this better, where we have the artichokes in there like that. So I'm just going to expand that slightly. And then I don't want to have these 2 masks together. So I'm going to take this, bring it round. And I think in this case, we can probably rotate. Edit, transform, and rotate this clockwise, or maybe edit, transform, rotate 180. So that's not too bad. I actually don't like that. Let me go back to our photos folder and just reintroduce this. Drag it on and then go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. Oops, the wrong one. Layer, Create Clipping Mask. There we go. So, and then resize it. So maybe I'll just show one of the packets or a couple of the packets and call that good. So now I've filled all of my frames, or all the frames that I have with the photos that I have. So yes, someone's asking to move it up higher. There we go. Can you see it better now? Let me see. I'm gonna kind of there we go. How's that? That works much better. Awesome. Okay. Perfect. Just brought that down just a little bit. Okay, good. So that's the first step. The next step is to kind of go and edit these images. So my favorite way to edit in Photoshop is to use the curves because it's faster. But if you're in Photoshop Elements, you can, of course, use the levels, and I'll show you how to do both. So for the curves, you're going to select the photo that you want to apply the adjustment to, and then you're going to go to Image Adjustments and Curves. And it's just a question of clicking about 3/4 of the way up that diagonal line and just dragging it up a little bit to make the photo brighter, and then clicking down the bottom here and pulling that down to bring in the contrasts. And that's simply it. The next step, if you're using levels instead of curves, because you have that option in Photoshop Elements, you're going to select this photo layer, and then you're going to go to Image Adjustments, and you're going to adjust the levers. So you're going to use the highlights lever and the shadows lever. Now, one of the things I notice here is it's quite dark where Eric is. So one of the features that I like to use, I don't know if this feature exists in Photoshop Elements, but I go to Adjustments and Shadow and Highlights. And when I do that, you can see that it brightens up that really dark shadow area. So, and then the other thing that I like to do, you can see that there's a yellow cast on here. So I know that this definitely isn't in Photoshop Elements, and I'll show you a potential workaround for it. In Photoshop, you're going to go to Image Adjustments, Color Balance, and then you're just going to shift these levers. So I like to increase the blues and move the yellows out for the midtones, and then I'll even change the highlights and kind of just shift away from that yellow. And you can see how by moving these levers, I'm able to change the color of that image. Now, if you're working in Photoshop Elements, a way to do this would be to go to Image Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and then use the hue, but change this master option here. So I would select the yellows, and then I would adjust this slider, and that's going to allow you to remove the yellows that way. So whichever way you want to do it. I find that the color balance is a little bit more accurate and gives you a bit more control, but this works really well for removing those yellow casts. So I'm going to go to Image Adjustment, Curves. I'm going to do this fairly quickly and just go through and just brighten these up. And you'll notice that sometimes I'm just lifting up the highlights and not worrying too much about the contrasts if I think it's already more contrasty. Another favorite way to avoid this yellow cast is to convert a photo to black and white. There's a number of different ways to do this. I'm going to go to Image Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. This works in both Photoshop and Elements, and you're going to pull that lever down, all the way down, to make that image black and white. And it's quite dark, so I'm going to go to Image Adjustment, Shadow and Highlights, and then I'm going to use that Curves to increase the contrast of that image. And I really like to add in these black and white photos into the mix here. So moving along fairly quickly, I'm going to just go through. We've got another yellow cast on here. Another option you can try for this is to go to Image Adjustments, and you can also do Auto Color. This sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. You have this option in both Photoshop and Elements. So you can see that removes some of that color cast, and then you can go to your curves. In this case, I feel like it's added too much blue, so I'm going to go back to my color balance and then maybe add in some red tones, maybe some pink tones, and kind of adjust it slightly just like that. And then we'll move on to this one and this one. We've got that yellow coming through the granite in the kitchen again, so I'm going to go to Auto Color. This one also, let's do this one with the color balance. So again, I'm just kind of just tweaking those colors for the midtones and maybe the highlights too, and then going to Image Adjustments and Curves like that. And then I have to decide, because I added a black and white photo here, I kind of want to add some more black and white photos into the mix. This one would be a really good one to do because it's so yellow and it's so poor quality. So in this case, instead of going to Hue and Saturation, now I'm going to go to Image Adjustments, Desaturate. And I think in Photoshop Elements, that's Convert to Black and White. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then go to Curves and bring that up. And then I can also create another black and white image if I want this one to be black and white. And if I'm not sure I want an image to be black and white, I'm going to duplicate that layer. I'm going to go to Desaturate. We'll add the curves adjustment. And then I can turn it off and on and see which one I like better. So I think I'm going to go with the black and white on this one. And I'm actually going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to add a soft light blending mode just to add a little bit more of a kick to that photo. It kind of minimizes those harsh lines in the background and really emphasizes the darker tones and the values in the photo. So using blending modes is another way, duplicate layers and blending modes is another way that you can edit your images. Now, if you remember previously, I turned off those frames completely by accident. I didn't need them at all. But I did fail to turn off these staples here. So you want to make sure that if there are any staples, you remove those from the mix. So I'm going to keep that like that. So we've got our photos in place. Pretty happy about that. The remaining masks I'm going to fill with either artsy papers from the Art Play palette, or in this case, I think I might try and use the artsy cards because that's what they are designed for. So I'm just taking off some clothes here because it's getting a bit hot in this office. I am going to head to my digital art supplies and we're going to start the embellishment process. So you have the option of using these papers, really great option, or you can use the artsy cards. And in this case, I've pulled all of the JPEG artsy cards out like I did with the templates, so that way I can see them all. It gives me a good view of them because I don't use any other sort of program to manage that. And then I'm looking at my colors and I'm thinking we've got purple here, so it would be really great to add some purple on the opposing page. We sort of ended up with blue. This is more purple. So I'm going to select this layer here and I'm going to look for an artsy cards that has purple in it. And in this case, and this was not pre-planned at all. None of this is pre-planned, which is why, it's kind of taking so long. So it actually works out that I have the purple in there. Now, if it's slightly different color, I can go ahead and go to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and I can play around with the tone of that if I wanted to. I can make it a little bit more pink. I can make it a little bit more blue. In this case, to be honest with you, I kind of like it the way it is, so I'm going to keep it like that. And we've also got this yellow here, which I want to support on the other side. So I'm going to do that by using that same artsy cards just for convenience and clip that to this side. Go to Create Clipping Mask. And I might want to make that just a little darker, so I can go to Image Adjustment Levels and maybe bring in those shadows a little bit. I can go to my Hue and Saturation and select that yellows from the master menu and just make that just a little bit more yolk-like so that we have a similar sort of color. I call these color buddies, where the colors are the same. And I wonder if I just accidentally managed to turn that off. So let's go back. There we go, much better. Okay, so I call it color buddies when you have a striking color on one side and then you add that same color on the second side. And then in the areas where we want to put our text, now ideally I like to have if I have text on one page at the top, I like to have text on the other page on the bottom. It doesn't always work out that way, but it's nice when it does. So I have a couple of options here. I can kind of just keep the text where it is and call it good. In this case, it could be that I end up just with one text box because I have so few photos. Even though it was 3 weeks, I might just stick to one text box. But that's just something I'm thinking about in the back of my mind here. But where you have text, you obviously want to choose papers or cards that have a little bit more white space in them. So like this one, for example, or this one might work. This one has a lot of white space in the top here. So the only way you can really kind of get them to take a look to see if they work is to kind of try them out. So I'm going to bring this into the mix here and then maybe add this in here like this. Go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. So that works quite well. And then we can afford to add a bit of visual interest in the top here. And I'm kind of thinking I need something blue here because we've got purple and blue kind of around here, and it will lead the eye back up to the top. So I'm looking for blue. We got lots of options for the blue. So something interesting. Let's go with this one. Actually, you know what? I want to use this heart. This would be kind of fun to add into the mix. So let's bring this guy into the top here. I kind of like that. And we can make it a bit smaller if we want to. And then bring something in here. We've got a lot of color going on down here, so maybe we want something just a little lighter. We don't want too much visual interest. So maybe we use this same card and go to Edit, Transform, Rotate. We can add this in like this. And I like how that brings in the green here. We've kind of got this visual triangle going on. So that's an option. So that works pretty well for me. And then we just need to add something here. And I feel like we need something fairly plain like this, this, and this. So we have this visual triangle. So I'm going to go back and look at our artsy cards. And this might just do the trick, this one here, with the white space. Drag it over, edit, transform, rotate, and maybe edit, transform, and I'm going to flip it on a horizontal axis because I want to make sure that that texture has the drop shadow on the correct side. Now again, this is going to reduce the amount of size here or space here that I have for my text, but I'm kind of okay with that because I still have this text box over here. I was a bit undecided about whether I was going to keep that, but I do like the texture. Just going to play around with this. If I'm keeping this texture, this text box, I maybe don't want to have something that's so texturized in there. So maybe I just bring this in like this. And then it sort of mirrors what's going on over here. We also have this nice texture and it works quite well with the text box. So that's adding in the colors. Does anybody have any questions about that? Just gonna... Britt says, this is so fascinating to see how other people work. I've already learned so many little tricks. That's awesome. That's why I thought this would be a really good platform for me to share more about how to use these products. As if you've been to any of my sessions before, you know I can talk. So that's the only issue is that when does she stop? Because I can talk. Okay, so what I personally like to do next is I like to add a couple of frames around the photos. So especially in this case, I feel like we have a lot going on here and a lot going on here. And we already have a frame, sort of a stitched frame around here, but I have these fine edged frames. So if I go over to my brushes panel, I loaded a bunch of brushes that I thought would be super helpful. And I have these fine edged frames, which are designed to coordinate with the templates. So I personally like to use these. They're a kind of, if you like it, great. If you don't, you know, that's totally cool too. I personally think that they add a little something. So I select the move tool with the auto select options checked. I select the photo to which I want to apply that fine edge frame. And then I create a new layer. And then with the paintbrush tool selected and my foreground color set to black, then I just go ahead and select the frame and just add it over. And so just notice how that just sort of creates a little bit of visual separation between those two photos. And so I'll do that a couple of times. So there's lots of different sizes. And of course I've used these so many times that I kind of know which ones are which. But with a bit of experimentation, you can just sort of lay them over there. So I'm going to add this one over there like that. And then we kind of need to add one over here. And I'm thinking we need some sort of perhaps separation between this one and this one here. So I'm going to go back to that previous brush. And if you're new to brushes and you want some guidance, I have a brand new, I have a free class, Basic Brushes, in my store at AnnaAspnesDesigns.com. You can go ahead and download that, and it's completely free, and it will show you how to use brushes and load them into your workspace. So I'm going to add this one here, and of course because it's a landscape, we're going to have to rotate it. So I'm going to click on this little paintbrush option here, which is going to open my settings, and I'm swiveling this dial around like that. And then it doesn't matter if it's not perfectly straight. To be honest with you, I kind of like it when it's slightly not straight. I'm going to add that there like that. So once I have my frames in place, I've added maybe 3 or 4, I'm calling it good. I'm then going to start adding my embellishments. So Ruby Lynn says, looks great, have this in my cart to use for my Holland project. That's awesome. Yeah, this works really well for any kind of photo intensive project. I personally like it for just kind of everyday photos to, it's a place for me to put all of those random iPhone photos that I have. And I can create anywhere from 4 pages or more pages a month if we're traveling. I can do 8 pages a month, or I can do maybe 1 or 2 pages a month. And it's looking like April will be maybe 2 pages, just because there wasn't a lot going on. And to be honest with you, I just wasn't feeling it this month. I've been working on Illa's graduation project, and you kind of have to pick where you put your energy sometimes. Okay, so my next step here is then to add in some of the what I call kind of project lifestyle documentation pieces. So I like to, and I've added these into my FotoInspired folder just for ease of locating them. But I have this 52 weeks number set, number 2, and I like to add that into the mix. And because we're working with 3 different months here, I'm going to add 3 numbers. So I'm going to select all those numbers. I'm going to drag them into my workspace. And so what I like to do, I'm going to bring them up to the top of my layers panel so that they're above all the layers. And then we're going to move them around. So I want 13. So we'll maybe place 13 here. We'll place 14 maybe over here. And then we'll place 15 maybe up here. And then I like to add drop shadow layer styles to those. So I'm going to select those layers, go to my styles panel, and I like this drop shadow. So with those layers selected, I'm going to click on that, and I can apply that same style to all of those numbers. And then the other documentation piece I like to add to this is this days to month number 2 set. And so I have a number of different font options, but I'll go in and I pick the month that I want to use, drag this in, and then I place this down at the bottom here. And then I have a coordinating brush set. So I go ahead and create a new layer. The coordinating brush set I've already loaded into my panel. It is, if I can find it, this days to month. And it provides a bunch of lines and circles so I can circle the dates. Because I'm working with 3 different weeks here, I'm going to use the lines because it's just much quicker to count off the weeks. So with that new layer selected, I'm pretty much just going to go, I think we started at 4. And I'm going to do these on separate layers just in case I decide I want to move them after this class. I'm just going to do this briefly. But you can see you can check off 3 different weeks like that. And I'm going to call that good. And then we're going to move on to embellishment. Do you guys have any questions so far? No questions? Okay. I'm really kind of going into detail. It doesn't usually take me this long to do all of this, but because I'm kind of talking my way through it and making sure that you get all of the details, then it's obviously taking a bit longer than I thought it, than it might typically. Okay, so for my embellishment, I am going to use probably the ArtPlay palette elements. I like to use those. And then I might also use the multimedia files. So there's some flower files, these, that also are a part of this collection. So I might bring in pieces of these. It's unusual that I will use a complete multimedia embellishment. Because there are so many photos on my page, I have to be really careful about how many embellishments I add. And if you want to learn more about that, then check out the Create Custom Clusters 2 class, which happened 2 weeks ago in the store at Anna Aspnes Designs, and there's lots more information about that. We do a whole section on photo-inspired and building clusters. I'm not going to go into that today. I'm just going to talk about just simple embellishment. Anne says no background paper. I personally choose not to add a background paper to my photo-inspired pages. You totally can though. I personally would, well actually I do. That's a lie. I do add a background paper, but I add it at the end. And I'll show you why I add it at the end, because I also add my favorite artsy paintbrushes around the edge. So we're going to go on to the embellishments, and I'll show you how I add the background paper at the very last point. Okay, So for embellishment, I typically will just use the elements from the ArtPlay palette. And I typically use the embellishments that go with the artsy cards because they're just designed to work that way. And it's just easier. Before I introduce any of the embellishments, I make sure that my cursor or my layer in my layer stack is selected, the last one, so that all new elements are added to the top of the stack there. And then I'm going to just select these. So I typically go for the ones without the shadows first, just because they're easy to import. And I just add them all in. Like this, and then I will go and I will look at what we have in the mix here. So, and I'll try different ones. Now these Photoshop files, you want to drag into the background and then select those layers and drag them onto your layout design. The reason you're going to do that is because you want to make sure that the layers aren't merged. And I didn't think that this would actually work very well, but I kind of like how that looks. So I'm going to keep that in there. Just let me show you what happens if you drag it directly. We've got this torn paper, which is kind of fun. If I drag this directly onto my canvas, you can see that it just, see where we have the twig here? We have a twig and we have a drop shadow layer. And it's super helpful to have these on two separate layers because it means then that you can adjust the opacity of the shadow according to the photos you have underneath. If you drag it directly on like that, then when you try to reduce the opacity, it just reduces the whole thing. So it's much better to bring in that torn paper element. If you're not working in Photoshop or Elements, then you would just bring in these two layers and you would place the element layer on top of the shadow layer and just layer them up yourself, so that you have that option as well. So I'm going to select these and drag them over, and maybe I'm going to place this behind this frame here. So I'm going to drag this down a bit. So I usually drag it down until, there we go, like that. So maybe we have this behind here, but notice now how I can adjust that opacity. So typically I'm looking for two kind of larger elements to go on each side of the page. And then I start sort of fooling around with these smaller elements. So smile, this is kind of fun. I'm going to place this here and add this drop shadow. It's a bit strong, this drop shadow. So when I've applied this drop shadow, I'm going to go and, where are we? Double click and maybe just change that. I like to have an angle of 120 and distance and size of about 2 when it comes to these little labeled words, or maybe even 3. And then I like to have 39 as my opacity. And if you want to, you can create a new style. So if I go ahead and create a new style, click OK, OK, then now I have a new style down at the bottom here. I'm going to drag that up to the top. So now when I place these other labels, can add this here maybe, kind of like this on the edge here. This is another way I like to use these frame labels. Then I can just click on that frame and then celebrate this because summer is a-comin', which I'm super excited about. It's going to be 80 degrees in Denver here today. And then what else are we doing here? So I'm moving these around to see sort of where this could live. And I'm not really kind of seeing anything right now. Oh, there we go. Maybe like that. We could have this on top like this. And then if I drag it to the top over that twig layer, then it looks like it's sort of hooking over. And I can add a drop shadow layer style. And then we've got a nice heart here. So maybe, oops, managed to drag this guy over here. This is kind of fun, having this heart. I kind of like how I'm now embellishing this little tree here. We've got this camera. I'm wondering if this camera might be a bit much. Maybe not. I can add that there. Maybe increase this shadow a little bit. Increase the distance on it and the size. There we go. And so I pretty much just keep adding embellishments until I feel like I'm at a point where it's too much. So I'm going to add this up here just to sort of draw the eye to this button. Or maybe, you know what, we won't do that. We'll add this over here and we'll add the flower over there, because it makes sense to have the flower up here, kind of like that peeking out from behind. Could drag this down. There we go. And then where is our happened to my styles? I have to go back up to the top here. Somehow I managed to close them out. So we'll add styles. Don't forget to add drop shadow layer styles to your buttons. Until you've added kind of what you think is enough. I think I want to add something kind of down here. I feel like I need a bit more down here. So this is where I feel like I have enough elements on here, but maybe add a bit more stitching into the mix. So I have some stitching loaded in my brushes panel. I loaded in these urban threads, which are always a good idea. And then I have urban stitches. So maybe we add in, I can rotate it. Let's create a new layer. Always create new layers before adding your brushwork. So maybe we could add in some stitching there like that. And I might add in some stitching up here too. Just so that we've got some, I'm kind of using the stitching to sort of fill spots and to separate images. You can see these two sort of blend into one another. So just randomly selecting, and that's where I didn't create a new layer. I basically stamped directly onto the layer that was clipped to the clipping mask and drag this in. So maybe something like that. I'm not really loving that. So maybe we do this one instead. To drag it up to the top. I got lots of panels open. Drag this up. And if you've got elements on different layers, you see, then you can drag them up and down. So I think I'm not worried about that line there. If I wanted to, I could go and add another a fine edge frame, but I think that when I add the background and I add the art behind it, it's going to be okay. So the final step, obviously, is now I've embellished, I'm going to add my words. And so I like to add some word art, and this is a great place, and this is going to add some visual interest down here, but I like to add one piece or possibly two pieces of word art. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the Celebrate word art mix. I'm going to find a title that works really, really well. Glad for this is kind of a pretty accurate feeling about this sunshine that's arriving and warmer temperatures arriving in Colorado. So I usually just add one of those titles into the mix. You can also play around with adding the word words. I really like to use the word words in. We already have smile, and I don't know if I need day in there. So we have the Jubilate beaded threads. Also in the bonus that comes when you buy the complete collection of the Jubilate, there is additional word art. So I always like to take a peek in here. So I kind of like when this might be kind of fun. So maybe we add this in here like that, and I'm gonna have to move it up my layers panel on top of that photo layer. So I'm just dragging this up to the top like that, like that, and then go ahead and add a drop shadow layer style like that. And then I think I'm pretty much good with that part of the embellishment. Now this is where I'm going to go and I'm going to add in the background to my design. And I like to use my favorite brushes, the artsy paint brushes, to add a little bit of extra artsiness to the mix. So I'm going to select that background layer in the layers panel, and typically you'll have noticed I like to work in collections. So it used to be that I would kind of dot around, but I found that when I work in collections, it saves me a lot of time. Everything's color coordinated, so I don't have to worry about trying to find specific things. Everything works together. It also saves me time because everything's together. So I typically will not deviate from a collection unless there is a specific element that I'm looking for. Say, for example, I wanted to find a mermaid or something like that, then I would obviously go to a different collection for that. So I'm going to navigate into my papery, and these are the different options that I have available to me for my background here. And I'm pretty happy with any of those, to be honest with you. Any of them would work because we've got greens, we've got purples, we've got blues. So what I would typically do is select maybe, what did I say? Greens, blues, and let's go with this kind of grayish white. So I select 3, I drag them directly into my workspace, and because I have that background layer selected, they're going to get deposited directly onto the background. And so this is where you can kind of look and see. I might even try that pink one or purple one. Drag it in like that, and then you can kind of see which one you like best simply by just turning off the layers. And I think I like the blue best, so that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to place that in position, use those arrow keys to nudge that into place, duplicate that layer, and then move it across. And you can customize the background slightly if you wanted to. So let me just go ahead and delete that. If I wanted to make this slightly lighter or slightly different hue, I could go to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. I can bring down the hue slightly. I can change the I can bring down the saturation so that it's not so bright, and then I can change the hue to change that color ever so slightly. So that's just sort of tweaking it to make it work for you, and then dragging this across. So you want to do that before you duplicate the layer, because then you don't have to perform that action twice on the duplicate copy, and then you can go ahead and just delete those layers that you introduced that you're not using. And then you're going to create a new layer between your image layers and your background layer. And so this is the last part of my process. I like to add artsy paint around my edges. Typically I like to use white and I like to use black because I find that those really make the design pop, but I also like to use some of the other bright colors. And if I have like a color like this, yellow bleeding into the background, then I like to sort of fill that out with artsy paint and artsy stains. So I have a bunch in my brushes panel. Let's go ahead, I'm going to close my styles out. Let's go ahead and just close these out to make it easier for you to see. So I have artsy paint 13, 14, 15, and 16 loaded, and then I also have the new artsy stains. Actually, it's artsy stains 12, not 11, but these are the new ones that are in the store. And then what I'll do is I start basically using my color picker to select a color area of the design. Sometimes I'll go more manual after initial selection, and then I start playing around with these different brush options into bringing in some color around the edges. So I definitely need this darker like that. So it might be something like that. I don't really love that. So this is kind of where the play comes in a little bit. So I like that. So now here I'm going to add this darker sort of green color. Add this down here like that. Maybe we'll add some white in over on this side. Add that in there like that. I kind of like how this texture comes through. So I also loaded the tape textures, and it might be that we can use one of those. Instead of adding these on the bottom, I'm now going to create a new layer at the top. Always create a new layer, and then I'm going to use sort of a mid-gray for this. Rotate the wheel just so that I can align the edge of the tape with the edge of the paper, and then finally add that linear burn. And you can adjust that effect just by tweaking the opacity if you want to. So that's a fun thing you can add there. Maybe we'll go and add in a bit of blue behind there. So I want to switch back down to the bottom of my panel, create a new layer. Maybe this time I'll use one of these artsy stain brushes like that. It's not desperately important that you get the right color immediately, because you can always add the color and then go to hue and saturation, and then you can play around with making it darker. You can make it a different hue, you can make it more saturated. So you have options, basically. So I just kind of keep going around and keep adding brushwork until I'm pretty much satisfied with the way it looks. And if I don't like something, I just go to edit, undo. And I like to actually save all of these brushes together. That way I have them all together, and so when I work on these pages, then I have all of my artsy paint layers sort of saved together, and that works kind of really quite well for me. I want to get this straight. Like this. So I quite like that. Sometimes I'll go a little bit dark, so you have that coming through. So that's pretty much good for this side, I think. I might want to add just a touch of red before we move on to the other side. So maybe we'll, not that, maybe just add a bit of red there like that. That's kind of fun. And then we'll move on to this side. And I like how this purple is sort of coming off the page, so we could use one of those new artsy stain brushes to fill in that. So maybe we'll add that in like that. Could even add a little bit of red in there. So I can sample the red. This is a bit of a brighter red, so we'll go with that. And all the while, I'm trying to remember to create new layers. It's not always possible, but if you can try and remember, it does help if you decide you want to undo something later. Otherwise, you're kind of left with having to recreate it, which is often what I have to do, because I just kind of get into the zone of creating. Add that in. It's not quite bright enough, so I'm going to go with white here. Add that in, and then maybe add something at the top here. Add this into the mix. Needs to be a bit darker too. So it's a little bit of trial and error, and as you kind of practice this process, you definitely will start to kind of get a feel for what works and what's going to not work in terms of colors, and also what you like. I'm going to just accentuate this blue over here. And that's a little too dark. And notice how I'm kind of rotating the brush too to get the best fit. That's not going to work. I'm going to go with one of those artsy stain brushes. Maybe do that. The other thing you can do too, if you like a certain area of something, that you can use the eraser to erase an area out. There we go. That's kind of fun like that. And then maybe we'll add in just a bit of blue here. That would be kind of neat. And because I used the tape on one side, I also want to make sure that I introduce that on the other side as well. So add that in. Oh, I like that. So I'm going to add that in, and the tape. That's what I said I was going to do. So I've got this tape coming in at the top here. So I'm going to navigate to the top, create a new layer, and then maybe think about adding some tape down this line here. What have we got that might work? Like this one. So I'm going to rotate it so it's kind of has a vertical orientation. Try not to use black, because black is very severe. If you use gray, it's just a little bit more forgiving, and that's the wrong direction. I don't like that. So let's try this one. There we go. That's kind of fun. And then go ahead and add that linear burn blending mode, and maybe even play around with the size of it too. I did deliver these tapes slightly larger just to give you a bit more flexibility with how you wanted to use them. And then you can also select that layer. Oops, they're really tricky to select. There we go. And reduce the opacity just to make that a little finer. And then of course the last part of this process is to add in my journaling, which I'm not going to bore you with now. I'll definitely go into that and do that later. But that is basically it. So I lied. I do add a background. It's because I've been working on Ella's graduation project, which doesn't have a background, that I got slightly confused. But I do add a background. I just add it at the very end when I've added all of my photos and my art, because that way I can see what color is going to work best. It could have been that I went with a darker color too. The other thing that I like to sometimes play around with is to go to image adjustment levels and then increase the darkness and see if a dark background would be better. It's particularly useful when you've got a lot of night photos or dark photos. In this case I don't, but if you have a lot of images that have dark backgrounds, then a dark background might actually work better. Okay, everybody. It wasn't too bad, an hour and a half, which is pretty good for me, talking the way through it. Of course, you want to save your layouts. You want to go to Save As, and I'm just going to save this here. So I usually do 2021, and then I'll do weeks 13, 14, and 15, and save it. And then of course, for most people, they are printing these. I personally, so it depends. Some people like to print these double page spreads in a photo book, in which case you can go ahead and go to File, Save As, and then you can just save that as a JPEG like this, so that you basically can upload your 24 by 12 inch layout. I know that a lot of the photo book people now allow you to do that. I personally like to keep these in binders. That way I can intermix these pages with my more artsy pages. So I like to have an album for every year, and I like to mix these pages with my artsier pages. So for example, when I'm talking about an artsy page, I'm talking about pages like, I think it's in the admin here, like this. So that's what I consider an artsy page. So what I do is I like to kind of intermix those. So I like to actually divide my pages up. So to do that, I open up that JPEG version of my file. You could also actually flatten. Oh, please don't crash. I didn't crash, good. So go to File, New. I create a 12 by 12 inch layout at 300 DPI. And then I just drag this on over like that, go to View, zoom out, and then make sure that it fits. And then I go to File, Save As, and then I call this like A, and go to JPEG and save it as part A. And then when that's finished saving, then I go ahead and I drag this over and I save part B like that. File, Save As, and then JPEG, part B. Oops, B, like that. And then that way I have two 12 by 12 pages. So I can go ahead and then print those as separate separate layouts. I personally like to use Persnickety Prints, and they have a great sale happening this weekend in honor of National Scrapbooking Day. And of course, all of the digital art supplies that I have used today are all on sale. They're in the on sale category of the Anna Aspnes Designs store. So all my new products can be found here. We also have our classic AA release that we've brought back for 1 week only. And then, of course, everything else in the store. There's a couple of exceptions. Products that have been released within the last 3 months don't go on sale. And that's because I have a large group of really loyal customers who come in and buy from me on whenever I release something. And it's just not fair to them for them to pay more for something to suddenly go on sale. So I always have this policy of keeping my 3-month it's a 3-month window where products released in the last 3 months aren't on sale. But other than that, pretty much even the value packs are on sale at the moment. So you can go ahead and get discounts on those. Or maybe they're not. They should be. It looks like some of them are, but I can talk to Vicky about that. But yes, so let's turn my attention to questions. I think that's pretty much all I had to show you. Fine Art says it's fun to watch your process. Thanks, Anna. You're very welcome. Thanks for coming and spending a little bit of your Saturday morning with me. Ruby Lynn says, do you keep your background color the same for the whole month? Nope, I don't. I basically, let me see if I can show you. I basically go with, I have my Photoshop file here. I have my years. Here's 2021. So you can see that these are all of my layouts for 2021 so far. And I use white a lot or gray, but I pretty much go with whatever suits my layout design. So it's all based on the best fit for my layout design and also what's available in the kit that I'm using. You can see I used a darker color here, and the darker color really helped to bring out the whites in the snow, and there's another one there. So yeah, I don't worry about keeping things the same. Because I live in Colorado, we have very blue skies, and I like to spend time outdoors. Then a lot of blue and green seems to happen in my layout designs. But if in doubt, just go with a neutral. I often will go with this brown neutral kind of color or a white neutral like this. So that's so it does change. It really just depends on the color of my pages. And then Joanne says the clusters classes were amazing. Thank you so much, Joanne. I'm working now on the drop shadows and special effects portion, so that'll be part 3. And Fine Arts, we've got Britt says gorgeous. Gosh, you stayed the whole time. You're awesome. I'm so happy you enjoyed it. I have a lot of practice. I got to get as professional as you, but I'll get there eventually. And I've got the best people supporting me. They're always so nice. And then we have, so Nancy says, in PSE, adjust shadows and highlights under enhance to adjust lighting too. Yeah, so the hue and saturation, this at the top here, image adjustments. So all of these levels and hue and saturation, those are going to be located on image, enhance, adjust color, or adjust lighting. So thanks for pointing that out, Nancy. Beverly is here and she says fascinating to watch the actual process. I know, and I feel really accomplished now because I've got 3 weeks done in April. so that's been super helpful. And then Farm Girl says, I just started using binders, like the flexibility of moving the pages around and adding others. That's exactly the reason I like to use binders for my yearly books, because my life is currently shifting. Ella goes off to college later this year, and I know that as we get rid of our kids, as they kind of leave, I'm going to have more time, and so I'm probably going to go back and create more using those photos that I had throughout the years, and it's nice to be able to just kind of slot them in. I tend to use photo books for projects that have a complete start to finish that I know I'm not going to add to. So I use both, but the photo books tend to be vacations, or like, for example, this book I'm working on for Ella's graduation, it has a definite start and finish, and I won't be adding to it. Diane says element work was especially useful for me. That's awesome. Glad to help. And then Farm Girl says that the persnickety prints 12 by 12 pages are on sale for $149. Yeah, they do have sales periodically, and I know today's one of them. I saw that same email, so I wanted to give a shout out to them because they're very good. They just printed Ella's graduation announcements, so that was kind of fun. And then they do all of my single print work, so I send all of those there. Excellent. And Joanne says, another fun presentation, Anna. Loved all the tips and modifications. Now if I can just speed up your process. So tips for speeding up your process is try not to overthink it too much. The way I kind of think about it is especially as I was adding that brushwork at the end, if I really didn't like it, then I changed it. But if I was kind of like, I don't love it, but it's fine, then I'm moving on. because you can always step back and change things, but quite often when you add the next step onto that step that you're not sure about, then that step that you weren't sure about becomes obsolete. You suddenly forget about it and it's not important anymore. Like this up here, it's not perfect, but it works. And so I think you have to kind of get to the point in your mindset where you're going, you know what, it's not perfect, but I can live with it. And that's really going to help speed up your scrapbooking. And I also think too, practice. Obviously, the more you do this, you have to remember I've been doing this for nearly 19 years. It's a long time. I've had a lot of time to perfect my art. And it's one of the reasons now I'm at this point where I'm able to share this with you, because I'm really comfortable. I'm really comfortable in my process, and I know what works for me. And I'm sharing what works for me, but what works for me might not always work for you. So if you don't care for this artsy paint look around the edges, then skip that step. Don't do it. You know, you don't have to use as many embellishments. You don't have to add any of the pieces that I did. You can just add the photos if you want to. So just take the pieces that work for you. And then working in collections was a game changer for me. Keeping collections together and working in collections really takes out that going to search for products. And then use what you have. Like if the color isn't quite right, see if you can tweak it before you go ahead and look for something else. Because you have the power of Photoshop right at your fingertips. And so I think that that's kind of valuable there. So just a couple of tips that can help you speed up your process. But I think really it's mindset of letting go of this idea of progress as opposed to perfection. Choose progress over perfection, because perfection really doesn't exist, and it's in the eye of the beholder anyway. What I think is perfect is not what something else thinks is perfect. And I know you've been to many of my Connect sessions, and you know we all have discussions about changes that I make to certain pages, and some people will like it the way it was before, and then others will like it the way I've changed it, and then other people want to try something different. So it really is very subjective. And Britt says, good enough and done is better than perfect. Totally. You have to kind of think, if you got my newsletter this morning, I spent some time thinking. So I was the child that did ballet and did horse riding and did this and did that. I wanted to try everything. And as soon as my parents had literally kitted me out to try something, I was basically moving on to the next thing because I was bored with it. This is the one thing in my life that I've kept with. And I was trying to kind of pinpoint this week what it is on National Scrapbooking Day that has kept my interest for nearly 20 years. And it really is this idea of the small steps that we make on a daily basis as memory keepers, as artists, to not only improve our abilities in our process, but to contribute to the archive of pages that we have. I kind of think of my scrapbooking journey as it's not just a journey of documenting my life, and so one page becomes 2, and then 2 becomes 10, and then 10 becomes 50, and then before you know it, you've got 100 pages, and you've got a whole shelf of books, and you've got this huge big picture of your life and your memories. It's not just that, but it's also this documentation of your growth. I don't know, many of you may have known Patty Knox. She died of cancer very suddenly a couple of years ago. She was a very close friend of mine when I sold my products over at Designer Digitals, and we used to talk a lot on the phone, and she just had twin grandbabies, and she left these most amazing scrapbooks behind, and through those books, her grandchildren are going to know who she was. And so that's something that I think about often, is that this is my way of leaving my mark on this world. People will know that I existed and who I was because of what I captured in my scrapbooking pages. And I think that is the piece that really kind of keeps me doing this. And I don't see myself stopping, even with Ella and Luke leaving. I still feel like I will be doing these pages of Eric's and my life, and obviously they're going to be changing because they're not going to have stories about Ella and Luke anymore. They're going to be more about us and hopefully the new things that we're going to be doing in this next chapter of our lives. But that's kind of what I love most. So focus on the photos and the words, and the art is just the fun part, but just don't take it too seriously and get too bogged down by the art. And keep coming to these sessions. If you like the session, let me know, and I'll do more of them. because it's fun. It's fun to share this stuff, and I'm much better on this kind of platform than I am trying to record videos behind the scenes. Yeah, I'm hoping that the replay works out too. This is my idea, is to kind of start adding more content to this platform as opposed to YouTube. That way, you know, all of previous sessions, if you go check out Brit's British Designs Twitch feed, she's got all of her previous sessions on there, and it's awesome. So that's kind of what I'm looking to do. She totally inspired me. And she's a sweetheart too, because she responded to my email and she helped me out when I couldn't get the technology working. So that was really great. Awesome. Okay, well, if you guys have more questions, you know where to find me. You can reach me at anna@annaaspnesdesigns.com. And I have got a busy day today, so I'm not going to be around too much. I've done my scrapbooking for the day. I've got other commitments and responsibilities like lacrosse games and returning skis and getting kids fitted out for new clothes because they've grown so many inches over the winter. So I wonder if my kids will ever stop growing. But I'm hoping to be back in this space. I really enjoyed this and it worked out really well. I'm really pleasantly surprised at once we got the technology going, how easy it was. And hopefully I will see you guys on Monday. We have an AA Connect session and a special guest appearance by Adrienne. She's coming in to show us one of her heritage pages. So yeah, so Britt says the replays will stay on Twitch for a while. So it doesn't sound like they're there permanently, but that's okay. I suppose if you're doing enough of them, then the content kind of remains fresh and new. That's one of the things I kind of feel about YouTube, is that the content gets stale after a while. It gets old because at the same time you're learning, I'm learning, and I get better at doing this. So I think that that's important to note as well. Awesome sauce. Okay, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful Saturday. If the sun is shining, go outside, take some photos, make some photo-inspired pages. Definitely devote some time to this amazing craft and hobby that we all partake in. And thanks for being here. It means the world to me. Okay, no more questions. So I will chat with you all soon. I'm going to bring up this crazy screen. You can actually see the screen that I have to work with. So it's kind of wild. I think you saw it. And I'll remember next time to keep my camera portrait here much smaller so that you guys can see the layout much better. Okay, take care everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.